allegations of maltreating their patients or any medical competence, they're being gagged because they dare ask a couple of questions and engage in scientific and medical debates, which has been the way science and medicine, as I understand it, has evolved for centuries. So with that, Sherry, I'll turn it to you as the moderator.
Thank you so much, Rocco. It was so nice to hear from you again and nice to see you. It's interesting how we get to know each other through these Zoom calls across time and space, and people that we've known about and recognized by reputation for a long time that we finally get to rather as meet as well as we can through these calls. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this international broadcast today and to be talking about the censorship issues and all of the different difficulties that we have here in trying to get people to understand the truth about what's going on with the whole COVID mix, about the mask, about the contact tracing, about the social distancing, about the fraud of the PCR testings upon which we are basing an entire global shutdown over fraudulent data, over fraud of death certificates, calling everybody COVID, even if you die from a broken neck, and all of the things that are happening inside of the therapeutics. We know that there are many therapeutics that not only treat the SARS-CoV-2 infection, but can act as a preventive to keep people from getting sick, even people with complex morbidities. And then, of course, there is the whole problem with the vaccine that I'm looking forward to speaking to our other guests and panelists about today. So I don't see the other two people that we're going to talk to about, so I'll wait until they come on board. I know in broadcasting and media we shouldn't have dead air, so I'll keep talking until everybody comes in. There they are. There they are. Yeah. Okay.
I'm here as well. I don't know if you can see me or not, but I'm also here.
Okay, and so's the dog. The dog's here too. So he'll calm down in just a minute. I apologize for that. So welcome to our two physician guests here today, Dr. Ben Tapper and Dr. Steve Malthouse, from places that I think are really important to mention just briefly on your credential. That Stephen is the president of the Canadian Integrated Medical Association, and Dr. Ben Tapper is one of the co-founders of Health Freedom for Humanity, which I think are important organizations and things that I want to talk about. But I want to start this discussion today by reading you something as a place to begin. A friend of mine sat through the online emergency ACIP meeting here in the U.S. yesterday. ACIP stands for the Advisory Committee of Immunization Practices. They're the ones who advise all 50 states and the public health departments about vaccines. Once they've been approved, they're the ones who push it forward. This friend of mine sent me this, and I think that it sort of sets the tone for the things that we'd like to discuss today. She said this: after watching just a small fraction of today's emergency ACIP meeting, which was January 27th, a few things became abundantly clear. They are targeting children and will add the COVID shot to the childhood schedule. They are going to try to remove all exemptions to all people. The ability for adults to work if they refuse to be vaccinated will become very limited. The censorship and threats against anyone who dares to question the narrative or otherwise, quote, jeopardize the program will continue to escalate and will become more aggressive. It will become increasingly difficult to find any information that does not support and go lockstep with the pro-pharma narrative. They've already shut down so many voices. It's probably only a matter of time, maybe just a matter of days, before almost anyone who does not comply with the mainstream message will be gone from social media and perhaps the rest of the internet. The system is so broken, there will be no place for freedom of thought, freedom of speech, or any type of debate with this type of control. The only chance we have is to stand together to become a loud voice of the opposition. So with that as an introduction, how do you see, let's start with Dr. Stephen Malthouse. How does that set with you, and what would you like to add to that, conversation?
Well, it's really shocking, but it's been on the trajectory we've already seen. It's gone from a vaccine, let's not call it a vaccine, let's call it experimental biologic products. It really does not prevent contagion, so it's not really a vaccine. And many people are mistaken in thinking that's going to stop them from getting the disease, the so-called COVID disease, or prevent them from giving it to somebody else, which is not true. It hasn't been shown to be the case. So it's gone from a position where, as a physician with a Hippocratic oath, I could not recommend that for any age category after looking at the data, at least the data that we have, which is kind of skimpy. And it's gone from that position to now they're going to be recommending it for everybody, including children. We know that children have an infection fatality rate of, pretty much zero, right? So why would you consider giving it to children? I think it's completely absurd. But when you control the media and you control all the voices and you're censoring everybody else who's speaking against this ridiculous plan, and when all those people are gagged and are not able to get out and discuss or debate it, then the media rules, and that's unfortunately I think where we're going. But as I said, I've looked at the data for this that is available to us, and of course we're still in the phase 3 experiment here. People are aware of that, and that it'll be a couple of years before we have all the information about what went on in the trials, of which we're still in. If you cannot tell patients what the harm is, then you can't expect to have informed consent. If you don't know the harms and benefits, you cannot actually proceed ahead to give a patient a medical treatment. So, for me, there's no question, right? There's nobody I would recommend this product to.
Great. Dr. Tapper, how would you like to weigh in on that?
Well, first of all, we saw this coming, this whole thing coming. We saw bills sweeping the nation the past few years. We had bills like SB 277 and SB 276, which you're fully aware of. And then in 2019, we had the World Health Organization state that, hey, the greatest threat to the world are people who refuse vaccinations or unvaccinated people. And you have the ACIP, the committee stating that they can't force vaccinate, but they can force compliance. And this plan has been well planned out, and it's being played out with military precision. And Corona is this Trojan horse to get all these bills implemented. In fact, I'm going to be fighting, being an expert, giving a testimony on LB 477, which is the bill that's almost adopting the same bill in California here next week in Nebraska to take away our religious exemptions. And these bills they're flying underneath the radar. They're flying under the public eye, and they're passing these, or they're getting them in the legislation in a very clandestine manner. And it's very draconian. It's basically the definition of tyranny. And you hit the nail on the head. They are coming after all exemptions. They're gagging people. They're censoring people. I just got kicked off of Twitter last week, and just because I made a statement about vaccines, that went crazy. And it's just they kicked me off because of it. And this is where we're headed. And they are taking like Simone Gold. She was arrested, and they're censoring these docs. And George Martin stated, if you cut out a man's tongue, you don't prove him a liar, but you are fearful of what he might say. I mean, what are they so afraid of? Why are they censoring us? And the problem is when you censor and silence the truth, then the silence becomes the lie. You know what I mean? And that's where we're at right now. And it's just the true art of healing is being eradicated at a very large measure.
Given the level of censorship that we're all starting to feel, I mean, I've been kicked off of Facebook. My 375,000 followers just went away. They've cut back about a third of my Twitter followers. They just suddenly disappeared. And then, of course, what they did to Parler and what they're probably going to do to Gab and MeWe and all the rest of them that are coming on board, hopefully, even BitChute, I've noticed, has started censoring, which is supposed to be a censor-free platform. Given that we use social media and have got rather addicted to social media over the last several years as a means of communication, the good part of social media is that you can communicate to diverse people across the country and around the world. The bad news is that you sort of give everything away, and now they're chasing us into these smaller and smaller platforms, which then, we've got everybody in this corral. gone. And so given the fact that our ability to communicate is going to become increasingly difficult, how do you perceive is a way for us to continue not only to get out our message, but to start to consolidate to be the physicians who need to come forward and be the resistance in this movement? Dr. Malthouse, Dr. Tapper, you want to start with that?
Unless Dr. Malthouse wants to.
Oh, go ahead. Hop in.
I just think we need to be proactive in this fight. I mean, we need to start, we have these organizations, a lot of different organizations like the Health Freedom for Humanity that are starting to protect medical freedoms and to, and just protect our rights when it comes to draconian bills coming our way. But we need to have our voices being heard. And that's the thing. My advice on that is just to our strength is in numbers. Our strength is in unifying our voice. And if we can just create that platform and organization, that is going to be the answer and the solution to that. There was the Great Barrington Declaration. We have all these physicians that signed, these physicians coming together. That's great. There was another very similar situation in Australia where they had, I believe, 600 physicians signing a declaration very similar to the Great Barrington Declaration. And then the government in Australia wiped it off. They took their website down and they just took it off. So, and that's another problem. These governments have so much power. And when a government has the ability to give you everything that you want and need, they have the power to take away everything you have. And that's a scary thought.
It really is, because when you just said that, I just want to make a comment, because now not only are they closing down social media channels, they're closing down personal individual websites that are owned properties. And today I just saw that now they're going after complete server farms. So that it's like the censorship circle is closing. Dr. Malthouse, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I think this is also reflects a little bit our move towards technology as the savior in medicine as well, and which is another whole issue. But we have to develop secure forms of communication, and there's no more secure form of communication than talking over the backyard fence. In other words, we have to go back to some really basics and start talking to our neighbors in our communities and work from the ground up. I don't think that there's any technology which is safe from being intruded upon and shut down. And if, as you mentioned, just allowing us to be corralled by our cell phones is making us inherently vulnerable. So we need to actually do things on a more grassroots level, at least work from two directions. Now, there's those people that have the technical wizardry to create platforms which can all be taken down. I think that would be great, but we do have to concentrate on our next door neighbors and our communities.
And maybe we go back to the old-fashioned things. For many, many years I said there would come a day that our cell phones would have the capability of doing everything except making a phone call. So maybe going back to phone trees and fax machines and things like that may be kind of the thing of the future, because now they've put up the prohibitions because of COVID, taking away our constitutional right for gathering. When I first heard them say that, we had to limit the number of people to 50 and then quickly drop that from 50 to 20 to 10, I knew that had nothing to do with safety. It had to do with blocking people's ability to collaborate and go, what are we going to do about this tyranny? I mean, the way that if you look back at the Revolutionary Wars, it's like people gathered in pubs and taverns and sat around and tried to gather their strengths and forces. And so I think that you're right. I think that we need to be doing this and maybe gathering privately in people's homes and parking your cars down the street and walking to people's homes just to have a sense together. The other thing that I want to mention that you said, Ben, about all these different organizations, which quite frankly, I believe is a problem. I believe that the people who break outside the fold of conventional thought, your mainstream lockstep physicians, because I think that I've always said that physicians are kind of like they're herd animals. They're like the pack of water buffalo that all kind of move across the savannah together, because the one little water buffalo that goes off to the side gets eaten by the lion. And so they all kind of lockstep move together. So they don't get sued, they don't get sanctioned, all this stuff. So I feel like there's a real lack of strength and a lot of cowardice in our profession. I really do. And so, but those few little water buffaloes that go off over here to the side that don't get eaten by the lion, they have a strongness of fortitude, and they have a lot of courage and strength. And every one of them wants to start their own organization and have their own membership and have their own things and their own this. And so you look around the neighborhood and you find 25, 30, 40 different organizations going after the kind of the same membership, the same membership dollars, the same donors, and now we've got all of these silos. And I agree with you with what you said, Ben, about their strength in numbers. How can we pull that together into unity?
That is a great question. It takes strong leadership. I mean, the quality of a great leader is to inspire others to take action, to make a difference. And we need good leaders to inspire others to get louder, to take a stand. I mean, I don't care what organization you're with or whatever you stand by. If we can just have one unified voice and say the same thing, have these physicians say the same thing, inspire others to get into the masses, to plant these seeds of truth, that's when change is going to occur. You know, I'm sitting 10 feet from one of my favorite quotes on the wall. It says, "We never know how far reaching something we may think, say, or do today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow." And if we can just speak the truth and inspire others to plant those seeds of truth, that's when change is going to occur. And it's just that simple. If we can just speak the truth in a very passionate way, it'll make a difference. And we have to understand that truth is on our side. And that's huge. If we understand that and believe that truth is on our side, nothing can stop us.
So
I don't think there's any doubt that we have truth on our side, and that's probably our strongest component, other than the fact that we have human qualities, and that deeply in the human, I would say that the genome, whatever, we're going beyond the genome actually for humans, you know, something that makes us different from artificial intelligence, different from machines. And though that plus having the truth as the kind of sword, let's say, that we have really great power that we haven't recognized. Just going back to this idea, though, of all these lions being out in the field, you know, this is almost a universal issue of how to have unity but have individualization as well. I mean, we see this in medicine, you know, how do we have one system which takes care of all, but at the same time recognizes the individual nature of each of our patients. So it's kind of like that. It's like we need to have an umbrella which brings all these groups together, networks them, but allows them to have their own unique characteristics, such as you wouldn't necessarily want the nurses to be absorbed into the doctor's group, you know, the doctors absorbed into the chiropractic group, or, you know, osteopathic group, you know, gone into the, you know, the naturopathic group. We don't really want that. So each of us have individual characteristics, just like every country has individual characteristic, right? And globalization, you know, working as a world organization has some advantages, but we still need to maintain our uniqueness. And there's a lot of strength in that, because, hey, you guys are south of the border, I'm north of the border, and we have differences, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But
we apologize a lot more.
But I will say that the unity of message is something that's really, really key. And maybe that is because I've been in countless groups over the years trying to get all of these wild horses to be canaled. It's like, you know, it's like herding cats, to even get them to have like a unifying message. Because I've said often, you know, the pro-vaccine people have one unifying message. They goose step to it. Vaccinate, 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 vaccinate. And we have so many different messages. We have it about health freedom, about bodily autonomy, about, you know, right to choose, you know, about informed consent, and blah, 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 blah. You know, to have that unification message is now more important than ever, to be able to draw people together to understand that, you know, if we were playing American football, and I'll say that to qualify that for Stephen, if we were playing American football and we're on the 1 yard line, they have we're on the defense, the offense has the ball, we're on the 1 yard line, and we're out of timeouts, you know, and so there's no time left for all of this dissension or massaging the message to get the comma and the period in the right place. I mean, moving forward collaboratively is what we really, really need to do. Ben, what do you have inside of your organization, your Health Freedom for Humanity? What can you bring forward with that?
Well, basically, this is a group that we basically, the whole point premise of this is to protect our medical freedoms. And I feel like this is a fourth quarter Hail Mary, because we are at the stage where the time is of the essence. I mean, we are in a corner right now, and the medical dictatorship is backing us in that corner. And they're not, and we need this group and this foundation is basically there to get influential people, leaders involved to protect our medical freedoms. And that's basically the whole premise behind this. We are going to talk about vaccines in this group and just the importance of true health and meaning, but the whole premise is to protect and expand our medical freedoms. That's the whole bottom line of this organization. And, and just going back to what I want to touch on what you guys were talking about earlier and the groups and being diversified, I totally see that. And going back to, we need to just respect the art of healing with all of this. We compartmentalize the body for ease of study, but we tend to do that too with just our philosophies and ideologies when it comes to healing. And that's the problem we're in. We're so far down this rabbit hole, and, we're hearing that the only way out of this whole pandemic is a vaccine. And that's a compartmentalized mentality. It's a compartmentalized treatment. And that's the problem we're in. It's all compartmentalization, and anything that goes counter narrative to that, they get censored. But and we need to respect the art of healing, and this group kind of focuses on that. They respect the other physicians in the group, and they respect the art of healing, and we're trying to expand the freedoms in that when it comes to all medical freedom.
Stephen, how do you think that we can get physicians educated on what's really going on with COVID and the harms that's going to be caused by this vaccine? I've just found, I've been doing this 20 years and 40,000 hours of my life, probably more than that. And to get a physician to move 1 inch off of the safe and effective narrative is extraordinarily difficult. And I'm sure you've confronted that in different ways. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, we have to see that physicians were targeted from day one, right? Because we're the people that are leaders, and also the people in whom the public trusts, with teachers and policemen. We're up in there, the top 3, I would say. And so, it would be completely normal for someone playing a game of chess against the, let's say, a better medical system, to move it to a pharmaceutically based medical system, to target the doctors. So doctors are heavily programmed. Hypnotic suggestions have been coming at us since the very beginning. So it's going to be a very hard job to wake doctors up. It's going to be very difficult. So I'm not really sure what the message is there and how to do that. I think some doctors are waking naturally because of the pressure. In other words, they're seeing some absurdities and even hypnotize people when enough clicking goes on around them, they come out of their trance. And some people are doing that. And so I'm seeing every day getting contacted by 1 or 2 doctors across the country who say, look, I'm in the OR and I'm talking to them and they don't seem to know what's going on. They don't really want to know what's going on. And of course, this whole vaccination issue, I've been following your work for a long time, and I'm completely in agreement with you. Vaccine, the mantra safe and effective is just not true. As we all know that, childhood vaccines, none of them been trusted against true placebo, as in saline injection. So, and that's just being carried over to this COVID-19 product. This COVID-19 product, is much worse. The others are kind of blended in there and hidden away, so people think, oh yes, let's protect against measles, mumps, so on. But this is a disease which we don't need to protect against. And people are trying to go like, well, I don't see any COVID cases, and why are we going for this vaccine? So people are, I think the absurdity of having a vaccine or something which is not killing people or even harming people in most cases is going to make people, the general public, wake up, and they will have to then start to pressure the medical profession to make a change as well. So you know what? We're so fast asleep. If we didn't have a fire lit under us, we would just continue sleeping into oblivion, into artificial intelligence taking over for us. So in some ways, where we are right now is the place to be. It sounds, we're under a super amount of pressure, but it's kind of essential. We have to have a fire lit under us to shake us up, to wake us up, and to get us to make changes which are essential. It's either that or, the death knell. So I think we're actually in a position now with this where it looks bad, but it's almost necessary to be on the edge of the cliff before we'll start to change direction.
It's kind of just the I was going to say the American way, but since you're Canadian, I'll say like the North American way of, you kind of, I've used this example many times that, here in the U.S., when there's a warning signal that goes off in your community, when there's a tornado warning, and and the tornado they tell you to go and take shelter. And nobody goes to their basement until they see trees falling down in their own backyard. And in this day and age, people pick up their phone and go start recording it. They don't even get out of harm's way when it's like right in front of their face. And I think that we've now been so hypnotized. I believe that they've used neuro-linguistic programming in their messages. They've weaponized their messages, and they've used the power of fear, to get into people's brains, understanding from a medical perspective and a psychiatrist perspective that fear is the most lethal weapon to people's brains. I'd like to hear from both of you on how do you think that we as a messenger and people that are doing messaging, either scientists, doctors, lawyers, can address this whole issue of fear, because it seems as though the facts are on the moon. It's like people are just so comatose and so afraid that they might get the flu from this virus, and that they can't, it doesn't matter. You could give them 1,700 facts in a bushel basket and they'll go, conspiracy theory doesn't mean anything. How do we override that and be able to get people to hear our warning messages and our messages of truth about what's going on with COVID?
Can I interrupt you there for a second, Sherry, just from a non-doctor point of view? Can I ask you to clarify, when you all are referring to the truth, are you referring to scientific and data, medical truth? Because I think anybody out there who's not a doctor may be going to truth on another level or another dimension. So you're referring to the science and the data with respect to the COVID disease or virus.
Thank you for clarifying that, Rocco. And I would say yes, exactly. I mean, I've reviewed 103 articles from the mainstream medical literature just about the myth of the mask and how the mask does nothing. I have read more than 50 articles on problems with PCR testing and the fraud that comes that we're using a test to define policy that was never intended to be used in clinical medicine. We say that we have to have this vaccine because there's nothing else, and vaccines have to save us. But yet we've got both pharmaceutical and nutraceutical things that can both treat and prevent. So when I talk about the truth, I'm talking about the scientific medical data from peer-reviewed literature that people are even ignoring that. So thank you for clarifying.
Right, and above and beyond that, just I won't make too many interruptions, but how do your colleagues who don't want to get out of bed and ask questions process and swear such news as, for instance, 2 days ago, Merck, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, saying, hey guys, we are abandoning our development of our 2 vaccines because you are much better off getting the virus and developing T-cell immunity. How do your colleagues swear that and not ask questions when they read or hear something like that? I'm not a doctor, and I understand that. Is it just the fear of getting delicensed, or?
Ben, well, you want to take that on? And I've got a definite answer for that. But Ben and Stephen, I'd like to hear from you guys, and then I'll tell you my definitive answer from that after, because it's a great question, Rocco. It's great.
Right. Well, it all goes back to the emotion and logic. Like, I love what you said. You can show the person that's in a fearful state of mind. You can show them all the facts in the world, all the logic in the world, and they're still going to be fearful. They're still going to wear their mask, and they're still going to believe that the only way out of this pandemic is a vaccine. And that's the problem. I was taught that fear is the fire that fuels the furnace of disease. And you add a bad flu season with this crazy amount of fear mongering and hysteria, these people are going to be brainwashed into thinking one thing, and they're going to be so fearful. But again, this whole narrative is it's a very common narrative, and it's to take away our freedoms and to push the vaccine agenda. And that's the narrative. And once you start asking these questions, like you said, Merck came on and said, hey, the data has shown that your immune system is fully capable of handling this without the need of a vaccine. Well, that should make national news, global news. I mean, because this is a global issue, and we should all just be saying, that's great news. Why isn't this on the mainstream? Because it's counter narrative to the agenda at stake here. And so that's...
Yet, Ben, when my client, Dr. Kulvinder Kaur Gill, said that a few months ago in a tweet, that's one of the reasons they've taken her to hearing and started an investigation at the college, which will be suing in Ontario. This is what I'm finding very frustrating, is that the medical profession, through the elected college council or board members, are disciplining doctors for what eminent experts and even the industry itself publicly concedes. Anyway.
So it follows. So there's two answers. Stephen, you want to chime in before I kind of give my answer to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't know if there's any pharmaceutical company that you can really trust, to tell you the truth. So I would be a little bit cautious about saying, oh, Merck has agreed with us, hey, but they're going to go on and try to make some antiviral medicines now instead of a vaccine. It could be that their vaccine really wasn't done. I mean, what is in those products?
They could have just abandoned it without making that telling statement.
Absolutely. So I'm always, if you think about chess, just try to go down a few moves and think, why would they do that, right? Why would they make that announcement? They control the media, right? They could just silently abandon it. So let us wait and see what their next move is going to be. So I would not be too trusting that they're agreeing with us in that we don't need a vaccine. But I would say the other issue is, why do doctors not go like, hey, what the heck? Merck is abandoning it. I think it's because doctors, as Ben was saying, they have an emotional response, and also they have this cognitive dissonance. They've got a narrative in their head, and that's the way they've been going. And when you confront that narrative, you know what they do? They shoot the messenger, right? They don't try to change it. It's a bit like if you have an opinion or a belief with no knowledge, you're holding on to it more strongly than when you start to actually learn something. And as you learn something, you realize, gee, I don't think I knew that much to start with, and then you become more open to new ideas. But I think it's this cognitive dissonance that is going to stop doctors from accepting something which does not fit their idea of what the story is.
And that was exactly, Stephen, what I was going to say. Two things. One was about the cognitive dissonance. Because when you confront something that creates cognitive dissonance, it's like you can't have a light and a dark stand in the same place. You can't have two diametrically opposed things balancing in the same place. For most people, we're hardwired to not do that because it's so uncomfortable. We're hardwired as human beings in our brains to not live in that space. So that's how humans have survived, is it forces you to make a decision on which way are you going to go with that. And so the cognitive dissonance inside of physicians' brains about the safe and effective narrative would mean that they were wrong, heaven forbid. God's, the ego that is inside of a lot of physicians' heads really prohibits that. Now, and I've been trying to say to some of the colleagues that I talk to, listen, instead of feeling bad that you've been scammed, get mad that you've been scammed and turn that into righteous indignation. That how dare they feed you a pile of poop and sell it to you as chili, something that's good for you, right? I mean, take it and get really angry about it at the right target, at the people who sold you the bill of goods, and then turn and do something different. And therein is the problem with physicians. What other options do they have? I mean, you guys, like myself, we're both into integrative medicine. We're into health freedom. We've stepped away from the basic pharmaceutical model that we make a living by handing out prescriptions for a living. That's what we do anymore. We have a much bigger toolbox that we can use. Many of our MD and DO colleagues are kind of in a box that if they don't give out vaccines and pass out drugs, what else are they going to do? So I think there's an educational problem. There's the cognitive dissonance. And back to your question, Rocco, about suing this physician for stating the truth, it's always follow the money. I mean, where do they, because when a physician comes out and says, wait a minute, maybe we ought to think that vaccines aren't so safe, and they start to crucify them, it's because they want to do what they did to Dr. Andy Wakefield. which I told Andy, who's a good friend of mine, I said, do you realize you've become a verb? They now Wakefielded you. They Wakefielded physicians, right? You're not just a human and you become a verb. And they want to make an example. So the rest of those physicians in that little water buffalo herd don't decide that they're going to run off from that herd. So they want to make an example. They want to shut you down. They want to come after your license. They want to publicly disparage you and discredit you and go after your reputation. And physicians don't like that so much.
No,
so it becomes a multi-layered complexity of getting them to understand it.
Well, if I can share with the panel, a lawyer's perspective, and because I've been on this file from get-go, over the course of the last 10 months, I've had hundreds of doctors call me individually. And in the early days and through the summer, the conversation went pretty much the same way, because obviously they reached out to me as a lawyer who had filed. And the conversation would go something like this. Mr. Galati, I don't understand these measures. What's going on? I don't see any science or medicine behind them. And I'd say, well, because you're not tabulating the geopolitical, economic dimension of the measures. Oh, what do you mean? And so we'd have a chat. And you get a sigh, deep breath, and say, and usually it would be like, yeah, well, I can't take that on as a doctor. I'll be crucified by the college. And literally, I got hundreds of these. And it wasn't until some of my clients were looking at the cross that they were preparing for them, were pursued by the college, that things start to gel, and things are gelling now in the courts. And so, and you talk to the legal wing of the medical association, which is supposed to be defending doctors' rights, and they're all saying, "No, you got to follow the COVID measures, it's the law." And in Canada, at any rate, doctors are regulated by a provincial body. And our Supreme Court of Canada said that the province has absolutely no jurisdiction to curtail free speech or freedom of association or religion or beliefs. Only the federal government can do that under the criminal law. So we're poised in a very good position up here to hopefully knock the teeth out of the medical college's gagging orders, which we're moving to do as we speak. And we're also in a lucky position in Canada that our Supreme Court of Canada has already recognized many times over the constitutional right to refuse any medical procedure or treatment. And so I was on a panel with Bobby Kennedy Jr. some weeks ago, and I asked him how he felt about some of the wins in the courts around the world. And he directly said, Rocco, I think, our only hope is to start in the courts to turn this around. And, we've had some pretty favorable judgments in the U.S. Supreme Court with respect to closing down the churches. Other countries have struck the masking laws as unconstitutional. Other countries have struck all the measures as unconstitutional. But I see the problem in your profession that doctors are understandably afraid to lose their livelihood. I want to ask the panel, do you perceive that? If you perceive that, what percentage of your profession you think falls into that category?
Well, I can answer that in Canada anyway.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would
you're
say
herding cat, right, Stephen?
It can be like that for sure. I mean, the people that are going to be stepping outside the box are mavericks by nature. So, that's why they're going in different directions. And that's a good quality. It kind of has to, as you say, be herded to create. It's good like, you can have a bunch of little rivulets, or you can have a big river. Which one is going to actually drive something forward. And it's good like that among doctors. But I would say every doctor, because they're young and they have families and so on,